If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Frank Gore Jr., Southern Miss Golden Eagles, and you're listening to FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
It's just a great conference that is at a point right now where they're, I think, clearly the best group of five conference in the country.
The state of Sunbelt football is the strongest in our history.
And we got to continue to showcase what our league is about.
All right, I'm just clearing my throat. Welcome back. Season 3 of FunBelt Podcast. First podcast of the season. Right here, right now, you're listening to it with me, Shane Metlin from Daily News Record, and Dustin Thibodeau from Warhawk Report. My name is Jeremy Harper. I am from HowRazor.com. We are back for a third season to give you every bit of Sunbelt news you could possibly want, all the analysis, all the penetrating insight, everything we know, we compress into this podcast. Guys, welcome back. I hope you had a great Christmas, and I hope you had a great New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
It was a great everything. I mean, it was obviously so great for you that you now know where Shane works, but you forget my name.
Wait, what did I call you?
Dustin.
Dustin? Well, Dustin is the guy who cuts my hair. So I have a real intimate relationship with Dustin. So if I call you Dustin, it's from a position of love and respect.
We were also just talking about Dustin Kearns at App State too, so
That's
it's on
true.
the brain. It's on the brain, right?
So it's top of mind. So let me ask you this, Dusty, because I know that you're a big party guy. I know that you like to go down, you like to throw down, you like to wake up in other people's yards. Did you throw down this New Year's Eve?
Not a true story. I was actually in bed by about 8:30. It was fantastic. Didn't wake up the next day till like 10. It was a fantastic New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Nice. You know what? That's the ultimate dad thing to you. Shane, I know that you're out east where, you're probably having some tuxedo elitist party with a bunch of real journalists. Is that how it happened?
I think I was at a basketball game on New Year's Eve.
A basketball game? With who?
Yeah. What?
Was it? Oh, wait, we had Sunbelt action that night. I forgot, yes.
Yeah. It was in the afternoon. I was home for New Year's Eve, but I honestly don't remember what I was doing at midnight. Nothing too exciting.
I don't remember because you were partying. Yeah.
No.
Dang,
I believe, I had a beer, I think.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I was in Venice, Italy, for New Year's Eve. Had a great dinner. Had a lot of great prosecco. That's the Italian sort of champagne. Really had a good time. Got to bed around midnight. Didn't do anything too wild. So but I had a very unique New Year's Eve experience. I didn't get to watch too much basketball while I was away. I've heard some things, so I guess we'll talk about that in a minute. Do we have any other house cleaning to discuss before we start discussing Sunbelt basketball? Thibodeau, come on. Do we have any housekeeping items to dust up?
Just a reminder to everyone, follow us on Twitter, FunBeltPC. Email us, funbeltpc@gmail.com.
Probably the most penetrating Twitter account you could possibly follow when it comes to the Sun Belt. Am I right?
I think so. I am disappointed because I guess we haven't mentioned the Twitter account in a while on the podcast. We haven't gotten any of those interesting DMs lately.
Oh, you mean like a DM that congratulates us on our penetrating insight and wisdom?
Yeah, amongst other things.
All right. Well, we need to shill out what is it again? It's FunBelt PC, right? That's the Twitter handle.
That is correct.
And that, and I think all of us have access to that handle, so we're always adding something, right?
Yeah, I don't have access to it.
Oh my God! Shane does not have access to the Twitter handle.
He wants access, though, truthfully, because I think he wants to say, yeah, those guys.
It's called plausible deniability, Shane. That's what you've got.
Yeah.
So when Dusty and I go to jail for something we've said on Twitter, you can be the one that said, "Hey, I didn't have access." So I don't lump me in with those miscreants.
Yeah.
We are protecting you, Shane.
I appreciate it.
Jeremy's
that sounds like a likely scenario.
All right. So like I said, I've been out of the country for a while. And in that time, the Sun Belt has been kind of getting it on, sort of trading licks. And who would think, Dusty, that when I would come back from Italy, that the team amongst the teams that's closest to us, the team that is having the most success in the Sun Belt right now is the Warhawks. Who would have believed that?
I would.
Me.
The curse of the Chief is in full effect again, as we have spoken about, where the old Indian mascot that the Warhawks had is angry once again.
Ooh.
That I guess he was tired of losing. Somebody desecrated his grave because it also a game against Arkansas State, the other former Indians.
Quite aggravated with that, but yes.
Rattled off 3 straight wins. Best Sun Belt Conference start since joining the Sun Belt in the 06 season.
Now, might I remind you, Dusty, that heading into conference play, the Warhawks own the worst net, the NET, than any program in the Sun Belt. And they merely come out hot 3-1. There is it might be a curse. I don't know what it is, but there's something going on. Tell us what it is. But don't just be coy. Who's leading this?
You talking about ULM and a low net. I cannot help that the voters of the net, the computer systems, do not recognize the highly skilled teams of Champion Christian and Dallas Christian. And we have no legs, no arms, and we play basketball university. I can't help that those schools don't count like the rest of them. You know what? Duke wasn't willing to come to Fant Ewing Coliseum this year. So we had to find a gap, a stopgap in the schedule. If not, we were just not going to play that night. That's not my fault. That's not on me, Jeremy.
What I'm getting from this, and this is very artfully said, that what you're saying here, and I appreciate it, but you're not revealing to me any reason why the Warhawks are doing so well. You're not going to tell me that there's some magic player that's come out of the woodwork, or that that coach Ribideau, or whatever his name is, Ribba, whatever, is like just getting the most out of his troops. You're just being coy. That's what's happening here.
I would never do that. And his name is Richard. I think the big thing, transfer Tyreek Locrour, I think is how you say it. That's probably not right. But anyway, him coming in, he's had double-digit scoring in just about all but 2 games of the year. And his play has really paced the Warhawks. In addition to that, Jamari Blackman, that dude cleans the glass and is getting double-digit scoring as well. How they go is how the Warhawks have been. they've really been able to have the offensive poise to make the runs and been able to scare opponents defensively to keep them off the boards.
All right, now that was the insight I was looking for. Thank you, Dusty. But just as possibly as shocking as ULM being atop the standings along with Georgia Southern and Troy and Southern Miss, some of those guys just as shocking as perhaps ULM, is maybe what's happened this week to James Madison. Shane Metlin, oh my God, what's going on with James Madison?
I don't know for sure.
Reading your Twitter, I could tell that you feel a little befuddled. Like you don't know what's going on. Like perhaps you have received the Big Chief curse.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think they've ever had a super problematic mascot that I'm aware of, but maybe there's some sort of curse. But yeah, I really thought that JMU goes and wins their first 2 games on the road, including at Marshall, which I think hadn't lost at home since Carter was president or something like that. Like, I don't remember the exact dates, but they've been playing well at home. I really thought, when JMU does that, okay, they've got a leg up on the standings now because not very many teams are going to go to Marshall and win on the road. And then they come home where they've been one of the best teams in the country at home and lose, 2 games that I think everybody really expected them to win against Texas State that had been struggling and App State that had been up and down. And yeah. I mean, I think you just really thought JMU would play much better at home than they did.
Well, I think we've seen this in the SunBelt, Thibs. You and I being citizens of the SunBelt for a lot longer than Shane. We've seen this to where teams come in and they're clearly a very talented team. And then there's something that happens when they come to these other Sunbelt schools where the game plan kind of falls apart. And I think that happens a lot when you play Kearns' Appalachian State team. They play a style of defense that is just hard to crack. That you can't get any points on the inside. You're forced to shoot shots from the outside. They guard the perimeter really well. Dustin Kearns does just a great job at Appalachian State. I don't know if they'll ever be like a premier basketball school, but to me, Appalachian State's always going to be one of those schools you don't want to play. Now, Texas State, they've lost a lot of guys. They seem to be really struggling in the out of conference, but to me, they're always going to be pretty good. That ULM, though, is 3-1 is pretty shocking to me, just as much as maybe seeing Southern Miss at 3-1, even though they had that amazing out of conference. Can we just assume, guys, that Southern Miss is for real and that 13th ranking that we tagged to them at the beginning, at the off season, at the beginning of the season was just way off? Can we safely assume that maybe the Golden Eagles are for real?
A lot to digest there. It's hard to play at Appalachian State, not only because of Kearns' defense, but you're also 3,000 feet up in the air where there's no oxygen. It's much like when Denver was in the league. No one could ever win when they went to Denver. And Denver was great at home and terrible on the road.
You're right.
And then you talk about Texas State. They've played a really tough schedule. I'll say that. But they are missing Caleb Asbury more than they thought they were going to miss Caleb Asbury.
That was a big miss. That was a big guy to lose. So,
and the frustrating, he's not getting that many minutes at Oklahoma State where he's at. So you got to wonder, was it really worth leaving where you were the man in San Marcos to be a guy on the bench at Oklahoma State? And then you talk about that. ULM was somehow able to get a road win, and that's what kicked it off when they went to San Marcos to get that big road win.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on right now, and it's pure craziness. Is the 13th preseason ranking of Southern Miss fair? I think coming into the season it is. They're definitely no longer the number 13 team in the Sun Belt Conference, though.
Yeah. If I was going to be a little disingenuous, I would say that, like, I was telling everybody that Southern Miss was going to be better than that, which is somewhat true. But, you know, I was thinking more along the lines of 7th or 8th than, 13th. Not that like they'd be looking like the best team in the country. I had this debate with a Southern Miss fan even right before the season started that Austin Crowley, I was like, I don't think he's going to put up a ton of points. I think he'll be a facilitator for Felipe Haas, and Neftali Alvarez is another transfer who really hasn't played much this year, been hurt. I thought he was going to be probably their second best player, but Crowley has been really, really good. And, I can't take too much credit for pumping up Southern Miss when I didn't give that guy as much credit for probably being, a first team all Sun Belt player right now.
So here's another team that's puzzling me a little bit. The Cajuns came out, I think, preseason favorites. Am I right, Thibs? Aren't the Cajuns the preseason favorite?
In the West, yes.
In the West or in the whole thing? We don't have East and West, right? We just have.
Louisiana was picked first media day.
So they enter the season. First, they get that loss to Texas, which is understandable. That's how they round up the out of conference. Then get this 1-point loss to Coastal Carolina, and then a 4-point loss to Old Dominion. Both teams not very good. And then they come away with a big win over Southern Miss and a big win over Georgia State. Is Louisiana going to be like they were last year, Thibs, where they should have been better than what they were, but they never could quite dominate the way that they were projected to? Are we looking at the beginning of a Louisiana team that's going to sort of disappoint us again?
I don't think so. I think that I don't know how well they'll do in the regular season because I haven't seen enough out of them to say, okay, they're going to contend for the regular season title. But I think that they have everything lining up like they did last year to be the hot team once late February and March rolls around and you're in Pensacola, which in all honesty, that's all it really matters is if you're hot at that time. But I don't think that they're really, like I said, the contenders for this year.
Mm-hmm.
Regular season.
So you can break down the Sun Belt right now into 3 categories. I'm sorry. 3-1 teams, 2-2 teams, and 1-3 teams. There's no in between right now. There's no undefeated in conference. There's no team that's lost every game in conference right now. Of the 1-3 teams, Arkansas State, Georgia State, Coastal Carolina, and South Alabama, which one of those do you think has any chance of really making a run or at least causing some damage to the top?
I would say South Alabama because I feel like they've really underperformed so far based on the talent they have. I thought I was pretty high on them coming in. They, Kevin Samuel, there's not really anybody else in the league who matches up with Kevin Samuel. They've got a great shooter, Greg Parham. I don't know why they haven't won more games already. And if they get it figured out, I think they can really, really make a run if they get it figured out sooner rather than later.
Metlin, don't get caught up, though, in the South Alabama basketball vortex. It happened to Thibs and I last year. Thibs and I are still recovering. We're still
dangerous place to be.
We're still in an AA program for getting too high on South Alabama because we were big South Alabama guys. Were we not, Thibs, last season at this time?
Through and through.
We're like, surely these guys are going to dominate. So, but what about Georgia State, though? The perennial Sun Belt contender for basketball. I mean, the Panthers have always been tough. They don't seem to be tough at all this year. What's going on with the Panthers? Does anybody have any insight on that?
I think Jonas Hayes needs a little more time to get his kind of guys in there. They don't really have any shooters, like from what I can see. They got some guys who can take it to the basket. They got some guys who play pretty tough defense, but they don't have much depth, and they just don't have anybody who's going to, turn the game around by making a couple threes. Like, I think they made a good hire, and I think they're going to get back to being an annual contender. But I think this year just wasn't enough time for him to really get a roster put together.
Yeah, out of the 1-3 teams, the one I really am looking forward to making the most noise, Cliff Ellis and his Coastal Carolina Chanticleers with Mustafa. He's the dominating force. He's the reason that they've really kind of competed in all the games that they've been in. They just haven't kind of put it all together yet. And I think that's what it is. And they're close to having it.
And what's funny about that Coastal Carolina team, Thibs, is during the offseason, it looked like everybody was leaving. It looked like the entire team was gone, like transferred out. So I kind of had this idea that maybe Cliff was retiring, that maybe he had told his team, listen, I'm not going to be here next year. But that wasn't the case at all. And Mustafa's back. Yeah.
Because remember, they went to the Final Four of a C-level tournament, Jeremy.
I love C-level tournaments. So they're the best.
I don't believe you. And you know what? We have a guest coming up later on that is a real journalist that will give credence to the C-level tournaments.
All right. Now, I like how I'm not sure who you're discussing, but I do like how you've described them as a real journalist, even though that would give us two real journalists on this program, because Shane, as you know, is a real journalist.
By day, by night, he wears a cape.
Shane, out of the new teams that have come in, JMU being one of them, who is impressing you most right now?
Southern Miss right now. My answer might have been different a week ago, but right now I think Southern Miss is still the most consistent. And, they're in first. They're tied for first, and they're, leading the net rankings. They're not – stuff like KenPom and some of the other metrics aren't as high on Southern Miss, but those take into account preseason rankings to some degree, which becomes less and less of a factor as the season goes on, but it still hurts Southern Miss relative to some of the other teams. Of the new teams, I think they're pretty clearly the one that's on top right now.
All right, Chad, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I don't want you to be the target of more online hatred, but of the 3-1 teams right now, which one's the fraud?
Uh,
You got Georgia Southern, you have Troy, you have ULM, and you have Southern Miss.
How are we going to define fraud? Team that I think is going to continue to stay where they're at. I mean, I'm sorry, Thibs. I don't think ULM is going to continue to win at this pace. I don't think they're going to win, 75% of their Sun Belt games. I just don't. But I don't think Georgia Southern really is there either. And, I'd have to go back and double check the schedules, but I think, if we're going to call fraud on one of them, maybe Georgia Southern hasn't played quite as tough a schedule to get to 3-1 as ULM has.
Yeah, I mean, ULM only had to go to Texas State, had to play Arkansas State coming off of that. And as well as I do, Jeremy, ULM never beats Arkansas State in damn near anything.
No, quite angry about that whole situation, but go on.
And then hosted Georgia State and put it to them and until the last 8 minutes of the game, but really had a huge enough lead that they kind of coasted through that game.
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of inclined to believe, and maybe it's because I love Dusty Thibodeau so much. I kind of think ULM was secretly good last season. Like nobody was talking about ULM, but they were really tough last season. They had some great guys on that team. I think ULM might be secretly good this year. They're 7-10 overall, which looks really gross. but they might be putting it all together for the Sun Belt. Now, I kind of agree with you, though, that Shane, that maybe it's Georgia Southern that's the fraud here. I don't think it's Troy, because I think Scott Cross is just a really good coach, and he could probably take 3 barrels and 2 kindergarten kids and turn them into a winning basketball team. That's how much I respect Scott Cross. I think you guys are both right. Southern Miss is for real. I don't know how we were so wrong on them. There should be an investigation. The FBI, the DOJ, the House of Representatives, they all need to open their own independent inquiries into why we totally misunderstood and misrepresented Southern Miss.
I have a theory.
Okay.
And it goes for the whole West. There was sandbagging going on. Southern Miss did it for a whole year. And ULM and Texas State, they did it for the first month and a half of the season or whatever it was. And then they get it to conference play. And they're like, well, yeah, it was a white man can't jump hustle they were running to, like.
You mean play basketball?
Yeah.
That's absolutely, probably 100% correct on that. Let me ask you this, Shane: is JMU going to bounce back, or are they kind of doing like they did in football, where they just sort of had a mid-season bump in the road, and then sort of recovered and came back strong? Is this the bump in the road for JMU?
I think so. I mean, I think there's and I'm probably leading the charge on it a little bit to overreacting to the kind of 2-3 game stretches that every team has over the course of a season. But I mean, it's just a matter for JMU of, it was disappointing to see the games that they lost. It's not that they lost the games. It was when they lost them at home. And really just kind of looking at that roster and the depth they have, you would think they'd be able to, that they're more built for the conference schedule than some other teams. And I think they're going to bounce back, but I think this week is going to tell us a lot about, where they're at, because it could quickly turn into 2 years in a row where a hot start went south basically after New Year's.
Well, that's true. You're going to get that South Alabama team that you said you think might still be sneaky good. And then that Georgia Southern team that you've implied might not be as good as their record is pointing out. So that will be some a pretty good indication if JMU can bounce back. Meanwhile, ULM gets to play their hated rival, the Cajuns, and Texas. Wait. You're playing Texas State again? Already? How is that possible?
I mean, everyone wants a piece of the Warhawks right now.
Oh, wow. I did not realize that they would just stack that so close together. Maybe I need to look at these schedules more closely. That's going to be exciting, Dusty, these 2 games. Louisiana and Texas State. Wow, that will be a true test as to whether or not the Warhawks are legit.
It should be a good one. I mean, and both of them are inside Fayette Ewing Coliseum. Students will finally be back on campus. So the illustrious Ben Moore will not be able to troll that there were 4 people in the stands to see his Panthers go down. Do I think it'll sell out? Definitely not. But December and early January basketball is always terrible because there's no one on campus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in fact, I was watching Arkansas State and Troy the other day, and it's at Troy, and Troy's having a pretty good season, and everybody likes the head coach and Scott Cross, and there's nobody there. I mean, it was completely empty. There was nobody there to see that win over Arkansas State. And then I realized, well, of course nobody's there. It's Christmas break, and everybody's still, with their families off campus. So yeah, so I think right now, this is when we're about to see the real energy come back to Sunbelt basketball. And there had better be some fans showing up for the Warhawks, because they're playing some of the best basketball that they played in a long time. So looking forward to that. Guys, do we have any other observations about Sunbelt basketball. Tibbs, I know you follow the women a lot. Do you have maybe some observations about the women?
Is there anything that James Madison is not going to dominate, Shane?
Well, okay. I'll go back to this summer when I talked to one of my favorite guys to talk to is Dan D'Antoni at Marshall. And he's talking about basketball. He's talking about men's basketball specifically. But he says, if you're going to bet on a basketball game, look at the budgets of the teams. And the team with the higher budget is going to win 90% of the time.
Ooh.
And I think that, applies across the board. And JMU has a higher budget. They spend, and they don't just spend it all in football. They spread it across their sports. And I think you're seeing that when they're having success in soccer and volleyball and now women's basketball and other things. I know you're joking. I don't think they're going to dominate everything, but I think they're going to be competitive pretty much across the board, except for maybe baseball this year.
And I say that, James Madison 4-0 in conference. Troy, to me, Chandler Rigby got her 250th career win this past week. They're sitting at 3-1, and really it has not even felt like it was that close. Like it almost feels like they're a 1-3 team. I still can't pick against her. I like the Trojans there, but James Madison is definitely a team on the women's side you got to look for. I'll tell you this, though, raise a banner. ULM, 2 conference wins this year. First one that they had won earlier this week. First conference win in 2 seasons. Raise a banner.
Congratulations. You know who's taking on the banner of defeat from ULM? That would be my Arkansas State Red Wolves, currently 0-4 in the women's basketball. We are now just until men and women combined, we have 1 win for the conference. So it's pretty sad days in Jonesboro. You know what, Tibbs? I am so happy for your Warhawks, man. Congratulations. That's so great.
Are the women missing Norchad O'Meara too?
I'm sorry, what?
I said, are the women missing Norchad O'Meara too?
I think so. Who, by the way, is doing really well at Miami, doing his double-double thing there for the Miami Hurricane. Great. Happy for Norchad O'Meara taking his double-double away from Jonesboro and to Miami, where Miami certainly needed it. I mean, it's not like we didn't need it, right? Anyway, but to your point about JMU and women's basketball, from what I've seen, Tibbs, those guys look just dominating. Like every score is like 80-40.
That's women's basketball. Women's basketball to me is always borderline. You're watching the benches to see if there's going to be a bench clearing brawl, because it'll get out of hand where you're tripling up the other team's score.
Yeah. And you're surprised that parents are coming down from the stands to start getting into fistfights.
There's something to that. Because, sometimes you can hear everything the parents and the coaches and everybody has to say too, because there's nobody else there in some cases.
Like my kids, for instance, they've been on some really bad sports teams. And as a parent, you have to sit through it, right? And the worst being a parent is listening to the other parents from the other school or the other team, how jovial they are and what a good mood they are. And they're such a good mood, they even stop paying attention to the game because the game is so out of hand. They'll start talking about an episode of CSI they watched last week, or like a pie they're baking tomorrow. And it just makes you furious. And that's what JMU is probably doing now to these other teams, right? Just making everybody around them furious because they're just like, here's another easy win for us.
Well, they've been winning close games. They've won, 11 in a row now, right? I don't know how many it is at this point.
No, it's just 11. Don't worry. It's not
12. But there's been a lot of close
10,
games. They've
20.
been, 9, 7-point wins at times. But, it's JMU has the 4th winningest women's basketball program in the country. They were down for 2 years before joining the Sun Belt, but this isn't a big surprise on the women's basketball side of things when it comes to JMU.
So Shane, Jeremy, we're experts, air quotes, on Sun Belt Conference basketball, I think.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, if anybody were to look for an expert on Sun Belt basketball, they'd look first to the FunBelt podcast, right?
I think so. I mean, alphabetically, because there's no one else above us. I mean, Shane puts a random A before his name trying to bump himself up in the search, but I don't think it's really worked.
We do our best. But yeah, we're experts. Sure, why not?
What if I told
after last night, I don't think the App State fans are going to call me an expert on Sunbelt basketball. There was a little bit of a tiff with them there, but we could probably get into that here in a little bit.
Yeah, we should get into that because that was a bit of a kerfuffle. I was watching that at a distance, a little bit amused. I should have come to your defense, Shane, but I wanted to see if you could hold your own, and you did all right.
The sad thing is I love App State's fan base, but like now I've gotten into it with them, like in both the football and basketball JMU matchups, and I think it's just a misunderstanding.
Well, you know what? I'm sure they do it out of love, Shane, and not out of pure seething hatred, as it would appear so on the Twitter.
I'm going to goad him and say no. He hates Mountaineers. He says it off air. He is not a Brady McBride fan. He doesn't like Sean Clark, Dustin Kern.
Oh my God!
Whoever their baseball coach is, their softball coach, even their women's lacrosse team.
How about the wrestling team too? Just throw that in there too.
I mean, he doesn't have the red X over it. He has a picture of his elbow, like superimposed over that guy's face.
We're making up teams for me to hate at this point.
We digress as always.
Yes,
joining us is a real media expert on Sunbelt Conference basketball as well as mid-major. He writes for SB Nation's Mid-Major Madness, and that is Riley Frain, who joins us to talk good old Funbelt basketball. Welcome in there, Riley.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on. I'm excited to be here and talk some Sunbelt with everyone.
So I know you're up north with Shane. You're in the Big Apple, but you still reach down and cover the Sunbelt. This year, there was really a lot of emphasis to try to get those net ratings up for the Sunbelt. Mm-hmm. So far, I think we're about a fourth of the way through the season. Outside looking in, what do you think so far of those net ratings for the Sunbelt Conference?
I mean, I think it's been a pretty exciting year. I think you got a lot of interesting programs that are part of the conference who are really looking to build themselves into exciting mid-major programs. Behind coaches like I think guys like Mark Byington and of course Dan D'Antoni. You've really got schools and universities that are looking to build mid-major programs and not just be like one-off teams that maybe making a tournament appearance or win the conference regular season. And occasionally I think that's been a big push over the past couple of years. And I think even welcoming a program like Old Dominion into the conference that's starting to find some success, I think you're definitely starting to see a big push to get those rankings up for sure.
You mentioned some of those names, and I do feel like coaching in the conference is pretty good, but I also feel like right now, if you maybe surveyed fans of all Sunbelt schools, a lot of them wouldn't be really high on their coaches. Do you think that's fair at this point?
I think it is, especially at this point in the season. We've seen kind of a lot of up and down from teams that were maybe, projected to finish high and are finishing low. And maybe some of the programs who, were kind of projected to finish lower have, found a little bit of success early into conference play. But I think with some of the better coaches, we've seen at the programs, I know I mentioned two guys before, but even like Terrence Johnson, who won, coach of the year with Texas State last year. Terrence Johnson, who won Sunbelt coach of the year last year. I think, as conference play continues to go on, you'll see some of those programs start to balance out. And, the guys with good coaching, you'll see them start to rise to the top of the pack in the conference.
Is it kind of a surprise, you think, that Southern Miss came into the year picked dead last, even below ULM, my alma mater, my school, that has not seen basketball success here recently? They're hot. I mean, 14-3, 3-1 in conference action. Is it a surprise that they've kind of come in and shot to the top like they have? And do you think part of that is also that a lot of the teams that they faced so far, excluding ULM that they did just play this past weekend, they just haven't really seen them, so they don't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously with Southern Miss, you've got a lot of transfer talent there between Austin Crowley and Felipe Haas, who have found a lot of success that I don't think people coming into the season thought they would necessarily be as good as they've been. And so they've definitely made for an interesting kind of program to look at heading here into conference play, 14-3 overall. And then I think 3-1 in conference play. And they were picked preseason 13th, I believe. So they've definitely been interesting. And, I don't think between all the transfers, on the Southern Miss program there, I don't think, as you pointed out there, Dusty, people really know what to expect coming into conference play. And I think that's made it tough, but obviously they've just kind of found a lot of success, and I think are just playing, well as a team, despite kind of what the notion was on them coming into the season rather.
So I have a question regarding mid-major basketball in general, and something that I've been not necessarily arguing with fans, but having a discussion about. You had mentioned off the air. You had talked about I cover some Power 5 programs. Is there such thing as Group of 5 basketball?
I'm sorry, Group of 5 basketball?
Yes, the Group of 5, like Mountain West, CUSA, the American Conference. Does anybody look at those and go, "Oh, that's Group of 5 basketball," or is that just considered mid-major basketball?
So I think generally it's still considered mid-major basketball, but I think kind of at mid-major madness, I think we tend to look at it as in there's different tiers of mid-major basketball, whereas, maybe the Mountain West schools like the Atlantic 10, I think kind of trend maybe more towards the top. And then obviously you have some of the smaller mid-major conferences who would tend toward the bottom, but overall, we just look to cover the success of all, these mid-major conferences. I think they all offer a lot of exciting basketball. You look at the Sun Belt in particular, you never really know what's going to happen. And, there's always a lot of surprising programs and a lot of exciting programs that come out of some of these conferences. And I think so it's all really exciting basketball. It's all really entertaining to watch.
Now, can a mid-major sort of play and popularize its way out of becoming a mid-major, like Gonzaga, for instance?
Yeah.
Gonzaga, we used to consider kind of a mid-major team. Now they're always in the Final Four.
Yeah, we like to joke that Gonzaga is not a mid-major despite their conference. I think you definitely can. We don't really provide a lot of, coverage to some of those bigger mid-major programs. Sure. But we still, still them being in the West Coast Conference, we still, kind of like to see their success, and they still make it into our mid-major rankings for the most part. But I think we just, we try to focus our coverage more so on the interesting stories and the lesser known stories within mid-major basketball, I would say.
Sunbelt's usually a one-bid league.
Yeah, for the most part.
You have a good week down in Pensacola. You get to go to the dance. You probably get blown out by Duke, North Carolina. Maybe you somehow squeak out that 14 seed and you upset the number 3. What do you think it takes for the Sun Belt and other mid-majors to really get that second, maybe even third bid? Do you think it'll require the proposal that was recently thrown out there that we just have to expand the tournament?
I personally think expansion could be exciting. I mean, just in general, a chance to have more mid-major teams in there, even if Power 5 programs will primarily fill those spots, you would have to imagine. And I think obviously it could definitely help a conference like the Sun Belt kind of expand and potentially get another program in there. But I think the goal is kind of what the Sun Belt has been making a push to do and getting those net rankings up, is to try and build programs who are, finding consistent success year over year. And that's kind of how you're going to eventually work your way and expand your conference into getting, potentially multiple bids into the NCAA tournament. I feel like a good example, I mean, obviously the A10's been struggling a little bit this year for those who have been keeping up, but, over the past couple of years, they've built programs who have seen, consecutive bids into the NCAA tournament, despite maybe not winning the conference out. And so I think the goal is to try and build programs that are finding consistent success. And I think, the Sun Belt is at least trying to trend in that direction.
Do you think part of that also is that you need to get rid of these non-D1 games? I mean, yeah, it's great when you can set school records playing Champion Christian and you beat them 200-4. But is that really hurting way more than it's actually helping?
I think it probably is hurting a little bit. I mean, you look at, I think it was Texas State this year. Didn't they lose to Division III Mary Hardin Baylor, I believe, and they were picked preseason second in the conference.
St.
So
Mary's.
it definitely looks. Sorry, yeah, there you go. So it looked really, it looks really bad on the resume just overall, especially when that's supposed to be like one of your top programs heading into the year with, your coach of the year from the previous season. And so I definitely think, especially when you're losing them, it's going to look bad. But overall, I think the goal was to try and build as tough a schedule as you can, to try and strengthen your resume, to potentially get a bid into the NCAA tournament. And so I think, doing away with a lot of those D2 and D3 games, I'd say midway in the season, I think they could provide, some good warm-up games as maybe preseason or even early into the non-conference. But overall, I don't think they, provide much of a benefit.
Yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about, the recent Sunbelt games. I covered, App State and JMU last night. I caused a little bit, I guess, of a disagreement with the App State fans, because I said at one point, I was talking about JMU's depth and how they should have been playing much better. I said they had 10 guys who could crack the starting lineup at App State. So I'll ask you to defend me, because I know, some of you guys have been paying attention to the depth they have, and they obviously did play well this week. But am I completely off base in throwing that out there when you just look at the number of players they have?
I don't think so. I mean, you look at JMU, especially at the guard position, they have a ton of depth. Obviously, that's kind of like the system that Mark Byington looks to run. But I think you even look at guys like Alonzo Sewell and Ofram, who, are doing what they need to do at the forward position. And like I said, behind good coaching, I think a team like JMU will kind of even out throughout conference play. But I think App State, tends to be a little bit mid-table, if you will. I definitely think when you look at the guards, you could get, I think a handful of them could squeeze their way into that App State rotation. I mean, obviously Tyree Boykin's pretty good. Gregory, I think, was a preseason second team all-conference pick. So it would be tough, but I think maybe I would take some of JMU's veteran guys, and I think they could probably fight for a spot in that App State roster. So I would say I could probably defend you there a little bit, Shane.
And it was not to say that all 10 guys are better than everyone in App State's roster.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was to say that, they could probably all make the, starting five on an individual basis if one was to transfer in. Not to say that, they're better than a CJ Huntley necessarily, but maybe one of those guys would be playing the four alongside him.
And I think even going back to JMU, I know I mentioned it briefly just a second ago, but I think outside of Terrence Edwards, there's just a lot of like veteran leadership on that roster. And, I think that could do a lot for an NCAA, Division I locker room. So I think, squeezing them into a rotation, into the starting rotation for an App State program that's, maybe not quite as experienced could benefit a little bit.
Yes, and I certainly meant it as a compliment to Dustin Kearns for coming in with a great game plan that kind of negated the depth and the speed and everything that JMU had in that one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, what was it, a 9-point win? So it was still, obviously a very good showing from App State. So you can't complain too much about it overall.
Yeah.
Well, and then App State, too, they play really tough at home. They have a really raucous home crowd. I don't know if it was against JMU. I know it's Christmas time and they don't have all their people there. But App State's a hard place to play in basketball, and Kearns has done a really good job of turning that program around. So, yeah, Shane, you're right to give them a lot of credit because they've done a really good job there at Appalachian State.
So we talked NCAA tournament. Yeah, it's great to go to the dance. You get the big paycheck, you get the notoriety and all that. I love the C-level tournaments. What is your opinion of those C-level tournaments, the CIT, the CBIs?
He loves the C-level tournaments.
Yeah, I love them. I love getting to see all the mid-major programs that show up and, often find a lot of success in some of those smaller tournaments. They're always exciting for the most part, I think. A lot of guys who don't get to shine maybe during the regular season definitely get like a little bit of the media spotlight, a little bit of a chance to showcase what they can do. Those are always exciting.
And it's always very unique games. And by that, I remember when ULM went through their big CBI run, they played Vermont. When are they ever going to play the Catamounts again?
Yeah. And Vermont's an interesting program. So I think you get a lot of clashes of exciting coaching, exciting playing, and exciting programs. And, especially like programs coming out of the Sun Belt, it gives them, a chance to keep going after the season's over. And like you said, play some interesting teams, hopefully.
And not to mention, ULM made Loyola of Chicago what they were because we gave them the CBI tournament the year before they went on their Final Four run.
That's right. I actually do recall that.
So see, great things come from the C-level tournament.
They do a lot of exciting play to show for in some of those tournaments. I always feel like can never complain.
He's just jealous because Arkansas State has never played in a C-level.
No, we've played in C levels. Just I don't have that fondness that you have. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where it springs from. I'm very proud of. I'm very happy for you though for enjoying those tournaments so much.
A 10-hour bus trip to Macon, Georgia, to play Mercer and get the win. What more could you want, Jeremy?
Nothing.
How many Sunbelt teams have beaten Mercer?
Okay, great. All right, you've changed my mind. I cannot wait for the CBI. I am on my way.
I hope y'all bust to Idaho. Well, Riley, we thank you so much for joining us in all of our whatever this show has become in season 3. Looking forward to catching up with you maybe around the time that we're all headed to Pensacola for the Sunbelt Conference tournament.
Of course, that would be great, guys.
So tell everybody also how they can find your work and how they can follow you on the Twitter sphere.
Yeah, of course. You can always check everything out on Mid-Major Madness, of course, me and all the great work that some of my coworkers are doing. But you can just come check out whatever I'm doing over at on Twitter at just Riley Frain, RILEYFRAIN.
Enough with basketball, guys. We know the big sport is always football.
Yeah.
And we didn't get a chance to really recap the bowl games that closed out the 2022 season. It started off with a huge bang going 3-0, and then with a whimper.
Those were good times. Hey, let's just stop there.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. Other than everyone thought we were kind of crazy for not picking Coastal over East Carolina. And we were like, no, there's too much going on at Coastal. It's all Pirates. And it was definitely all Pirates. As Grayson McCall left the game hurt, was in the transfer portal at the time, but still going to play that game. He has since decided that he still pisses Till and is coming back to Conway.
Oh, the good news for that is that the Sun Belt retains one of its more marketable players, right?
Can we make him 4-time player of the year already?
We might as well just hand him the trophy. The bad news is, if you're not a Coastal Carolina fan, you got to contend with Grayson McCall some more. So I was kind of happy. I was relieved to have him out of my life. Now he's back. What are we going to do? We got to bear the slings and arrows of his big time touchdown passes. That's it.
What else can you say?
Looking at the bowl games, though, really that Coastal Carolina game was the only game that just got out of hand. And you knew it was not going to be a win. Even I think the South Alabama game in the New Orleans Bowl, they were okay in there. I mean, I didn't feel overly confident going in that they were going to get the win, but I don't feel like they just got absolutely embarrassed and manhandled. I think the one that hurt the most, though, was that Georgia Southern game in Montgomery, Alabama, the Camellia Bowl, just unable to quite get over the hump to get that game.
Sorry.
I was hoping Shane was going to jump in because I didn't get to see any of the games. Shane, you watch those games, right?
Here and there. Yeah, I mean, on our last episode,
yes,
on our season finale, I had my theory about how you should view bowl season, and clearly, Troy beating UTSA and games like that clearly show the Sun Belt superiority, and the 4-game losing streak in the bowl games really just showed those teams had moved on from the season. They didn't care. Grayson McCall takes himself out of the game. It doesn't matter. That's how you got to look at the bowl seasons. If you win, it proves something. If you lose, it was because it didn't matter to you. It was just an exhibition. And
Well, yeah. All right. Here's something. I understand what you're saying that, Shane, because it's I understand it because it's true.
That's the way to enjoy bowl season.
It's
no
totally
matter
true. But I tell you one thing that hurts the Sun Belt in a way is that the Sun Belt has been sort of bragging about the off-season dominance for about 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody beats the Sun Belt when it comes to bowl games. Now we don't get to say that anymore. Are we going to be able to recover messaging-wise from these defeats?
Yeah, I mean, we kicked Houston out of the G5. They're now going Big 12. So, I mean.
Yeah. I think, if you're the PR person in charge of spinning it, you say, hey, look at what Troy did. They beat that really good UTSA team. They were the Sun Belt champions, and they proved it in the bowl season. And they could have been Tulane. They could have beaten USC. Like, put us in there next year and let us show what the Sun Belt can do, because, we saw what Tulane did against the Sun Belt team. If I'm trying to spin it, that's what I'm focusing more on, is probably really putting a lot of emphasis on what our champion did and what they could have done if given a chance.
That's true. I think that if we were going to lose a bunch of bowl games, winning the one against UTSA probably makes up for all that, right? The battle of the top 25 teams with Troy coming out on top. That was probably worth more than the other losses were combined, right?
I just wish that wasn't the coming out of the gate bowl. But yes, I do agree with you.
Yeah, it would be much nicer if that was the last taste that the Sun Belt delivered instead of the big thrashing from East Carolina against Coastal Carolina, who I wonder, guys, have we seen sort of the heyday of Coastal? They fell apart at the end of the season after, kind of remaining in the spotlight in a lot of ways. Now that the celebrated coach, Jamie Chadwell, is gone, they've got new administration come in. I can't remember the name of the new head coach. I got to do my homework, I guess.
Tim Beck.
Who?
Tim Beck.
Okay, Tim Beck. I should be able to remember that. Tim Beck, he's got his new crew in there. Grayson McCall's back. That's great. But it has the sort of flashed in the pan Chanticleers. Is it done? Tibbs, is it done for the Chanticleers? Is it time to move on to the JMUs and Appalachian States and Georgia Southerns? Have they now kind of moved in on the space that was owned in a sort of celebrated but brief way by the Chanticleers?
Depends on what you consider done. I think that there's still a 6 or 7 win team.
Okay.
And by all accounts, both of us, Jeremy, I think we would say we're back at being a 6 or 7 win team.
I would love that.
I don't think they're going over, if that's what you mean. Even without McCall, I think that they're still anywhere from a 5 to 7 win team. Period.
Because I wonder if maybe they're on a sort of Georgia Southern trajectory where, they hit that wall and they spent a couple years just really not playing very good football. But I don't know. It's just, like we said, Coastal Carolina is a very small school. I don't know what kind of financial resources they have. Maybe this was just some good luck that they had. They had Chadwell with great leadership. Now it's gone. I don't know. I don't know if they're a player or not anymore. But I guess we'll see.
They've got Hooters money to make up for not being a huge school. So I think that helps. I don't think they're totally going away. I do find it interesting that you called that Jeremy, of all people, called that the Georgia Southern trajectory. When that, I think that could apply to Arkansas State a little bit, to being up there on top of the league, and then having that down period.
Well, the reason why I said Georgia Southern is because they have gone down, but now they're coming back up.
Okay.
I don't know if Arkansas State's ever coming back up.
They will.
So we'll just have to see if Arkansas State can achieve the same level of up and down trajectory as Georgia Southern has achieved. But we'll see.
Guys, we're lining up also to be able to have a couple more Sunbelt players in the NFL, as Michael Jefferson and Johnny Lumpkin of Louisiana Lafayette. They're headed to Indianapolis for the NFL Combine.
Ooh.
Does that really matter to you? You think that we are able to get guys in the Combine, or do you think it's just draft me and show me what you can do on Sundays?
Are you asking, is it important that the Sunbelt get people into the Combine?
Yes.
I think absolutely. I think when you don't have Sunbelt represented in the, like, for instance, if you don't have them represented in the Senior Bowl, the Reese's Pieces Senior Bowl, and if you don't have them represented in the Combine, I think actually recruits notice that, and they go, well, I can't go any further if I go into the Sun Belt. I can't take that next step that I want to take. So when you see Sun Belt programs get into the Combine, and you see those little news clips on ESPN where somebody lifted a bunch of weights, or somebody was super fast in the cone drill, and it happened to be from somebody from the Sun Belt, I think that's just more good news for the Sun Belt. So I hope we haven't seen the full invitation list yet for the Combine, right?
I have not seen that.
I don't think that's out yet, but I always look to see how many we get. And I certainly look at the NFL draft that's coming up pretty soon in April, right? And see and use that as a measuring stick for success. Shane, do you think that getting draftees in the NFL is a measuring stick for the conference, or is it more of a sort of a luxury piece that we don't really need?
It is. I mean, you want to recruit guys who think they can play in the NFL someday, and they want to go where they think they can get to the NFL. And the Sun Belt has a fairly good track record of that. I've never quite understood how they decide who goes to the Combine, who doesn't. It's always seemed like there's guys who would have made sense to get an invite, and they don't. There's guys that go when they know they're not even going to really participate in anything. So I don't know exactly how it works, but I'm with you that it is a thing that, if you're Louisiana, you're going to be pointing to that. Hey, come here, because you're going to get invited to the Combine if you play well, and you're going to have a chance to get drafted. And other teams maybe focus a little bit more on their own pro days, which are going to be coming up, and those will be interesting to see. And I don't even end up following the NFL that much myself, just because, like, by the time I get done with things on Saturday, kind of just want to take Sunday off. But but it's huge. It's a big deal to be able to say our school, our conference is a pathway to the NFL if you work hard enough.
And I always kind of thought too that if you get invited to the Combine, that increases your chances of getting your name called on during the NFL draft much more than it would if you didn't make it to the Combine. Now, I've seen Sunbelt guys go to the Combine and then not get drafted. I've seen that happen, but it seems like the percentage is pretty high that if the NFL looks at you and say you're worthy of a Combine invite, then you're probably on the radar for a lot of teams.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I think, if getting invited to the Combine is almost like half the battle. You're going to be, at the very least, invited to a camp somewhere if you've already made it that far.
Now, Thibs, you're on the recruiting end a lot, from high school to college. Do you see the Combine as something that is important for the Sun Belt to be represented in?
Yeah, without a doubt, it is important. Just like it is, any college that's out recruiting is going to also emphasize how many guys did they have that were picked up on camp tryouts or their own practice squads. Just whatever it takes to show these kids coming out of high school, junior college, whatever, that you come here and you'll have the chance. And I think that's what, at the end of the day, most kids just want, is that chance. So on that note, it is the first edition for the 2023 version of Plugs, Promos, and Parting Shots. Shane, please lay it on us.
Parting shot. I'm gonna make peace with App State fans. I never meant for it to get this way. I think you got some good basketball players. We disagreed on a call in football, but I'm not even a JMU fan. I don't care who wins against JMU and App State. I've been blessed to see some very entertaining games between those schools already in this new rivalry. Let's just all get along.
Well said. Well done. I hope that they accept the olive branch, Shane.
Yes.
I have like a parting story to tell. And this is where you guys were like, man, let me hear it.
Ooh,
All right, so I'm in Venice, right? It's my last day in Venice. And I've been really wanting to go to this place, this bar, Harry's Bar, which had been frequented by a lot of celebrity writers over the years, guys like Hemingway and people like Frank Lloyd Wright, for instance, and Truman Capote and Katharine Hepburn. It's this 90-year-old bar that's right there on the water. So the last day we were there, my kids had their own agendas. My wife had an agenda she wanted to do. So I kind of left by myself. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to go to this bar. So what you do when you're in Venice, you see this, everybody's kind of in the same path. No one knows where to go. So you take your phone and you use Google Maps, and it's almost like geocaching. You ever geocache?
Some people do it, but I've never done it.
It feels like you're geocaching. You're looking for a point and stuff. So, but I finally find the place. It's this tiny bar. It's got the small door to go through. You get into it, and it's a bar that's barely bigger than a living room. Right? It's kind of there's like a 4-stool bar, and then there's a couple tables, and people are sitting around having their drinks. It's really easy to sort of imagine, being back in the 1940s and hanging out with like Joe DiMaggio and having a drink here. So I order a Manhattan, right? And I drink the Manhattan, and I'm kind of thinking that I've really imprinted myself on this legendary place, right? Like I'm one of the guys, I may not be famous like Frank Lloyd Wright, but I'm FunBelt podcast guy. So I'm like part of the legend of Harry's Bar. And so then I order another drink, and this time it's something called a Bellini, which is a drink that they invented in this bar. So I have the drink, and I down that. And then so after the 2 drinks, I'm like, okay, I think I've had enough. I'm going to go back to the hotel. We're going to have dinner. It's going to be great. I slide off my bar stool, and my foot had fallen completely asleep. It was dead. It was like coma. Like it was almost like it wasn't even there. I kind of staggered. And the bartender's like, oh my God, sir, are you okay? I know what he's thinking. He's thinking, I served this guy 2 drinks and he's hammered. So I'm like, no, I'm fine. I just, my foot has fallen asleep. So I try to take another step to show that I'm fine, but the foot is still asleep. And my foot just crumbles beneath my ankle, and I sprain the top of my foot. Like the searing pain comes through my leg, through the deadness of the leg. I'm like, like I put out this scream. And so they just think now I'm just hammered, and they like lead me to like a bench to where they think I'm like going to, I don't know, sleep it off or something. And then finally the foot kind of comes back alive, but I've got this, cramp. this sprain in my foot. So I just ended up sort of shuffling out of Harry's bar as in an inglorious manner that I just hadn't anticipated doing. I was kind of hoping that somehow I would be part of the legend of Harry's bar, but all I did was add to the shame. And that's my story about being in Venice. So that's what you get.
We're so proud of you for wearing your FunBelt podcast t-shirt during all that.
I should have screamed as I hobbled off. Listen to the FunBelt podcast. I'm on the show. That's all I got.
A couple notes that I have. Emo Essen, a guard from Old Dominion, recently collapsed this past weekend, a game at Georgia Southern. Thoughts and prayers for him. I know everyone's focused on the guy from the Buffalo Bills, but it happens in our league as well. Marshall finally has a head coach, a guy, though, that has not coached in 2 years. Greg Bills was originally at Ohio State, relieved of duties in May of 2022 before landing at Akron in July, and is now leading your Marshall Thundering Herd.
Awesome. Good work.
So that's a wrap of season 3, episode 1. Dusty Thibodeau, Warhawk Report, Jeremy Harper of HowlRaiser.com, and Shane Metlin of the Daily News Record. Looking forward to season 3, guys. And as we get into baseball, softball, and basketball, of course, down the stretch, and always football. So until next week, thanks for listening.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.